Well, hello, everybody. I'm Hal,
And I'm Melanie.
and we want to welcome you to another episode of Making Biblical Family Life Practical. Okay, our last episode, we were talking about rules in the context of relationship. But one of the things that comes up, we've got a large family, we've got a range of ages, and we have heard some of those discussions like, I don't know why he gets to do this and I can't.
Or you would have never let me do that.
And you will hear both of these. And so we want to talk
You
about a
will.
little bit about having rules that are different for different kids in the same family, and how do you deal with these conversations, which you will have. So, if you don't know us yet, we have 8 kids. We've got a range. What's the range in there? About 19 years between front and the back of
Yes,
that?
absolutely.
And
We
so,
have 6 boys in a row that are all adults now,
mhm,
and 2 girls that are teens at home.
okay.
And we've been around the block a few times with this because kids tend to be very black and white.
Mhm,
Is this the rule or is this not the rule? And we need to make sure that our kids understand that when it comes to household rules,
mhm.
that they're not going to be the same from child to child. That
Mhm.
you can't have the same rules for a 2-year-old that you have for a 7-year-old, that you have for a 14-year-old, that you have for a 21-year-old who's home visiting from college.
Right. And I think everybody knows that there's restrictions that you put on your toddlers that you don't put on your elementary school students. But we do meet people who seem to struggle with the concept of you've got to relax a lot of the strictures that you put on your 7 to 10-year-old when you're talking about a 15 to 18-year-old. That there's a reason that those rules change and should change.
Well, if we talk about the younger age, I think that helps people get it.
Okay.
Because your 2-year-old can't be allowed in the bathroom by themselves. Because what
Right.
happens? They get in the toilet, they make a mess, they get in trouble. Whereas it would be silly not to let your 7-year-old have access to the bathroom without help, right?
Right.
And so in the same way, our God's law never changes. And some things are always going to be wrong in our house. Lying is always going to be wrong in our house.
Right.
Cheating or stealing is always going to be wrong in our house.
Those are universals. Those are God's commandments. There's no question. Those apply to mom and dad as well as to the baby. Everybody has to follow those sort of rules.
But household management rules, those change.
Right.
Those are going to be applicable to a certain age, to a
Mhm.
certain situation even.
Right.
Those are going to be things. And even if I say never throw something in the kitchen, if there's a fire in the toaster oven, throw some baking soda on it,
Right.
Household rules are rules that we make for a time and a situation.
Yeah, and they may be different than everybody else's family's rules. I mean, it's just these are our rules for our home, our family, our circumstances, and we can say that without judging anybody else that has different rules.
Well, for example, one family may be fine with their boys wrestling in their family room because it's in the basement, they have yard sale furniture, and it's meant to be a place where people can just do anything.
But if you have another family that may have antiques or different, artwork or something around the living room, may have to tell their kids, hey, don't wrestle in the house. Take it outside. You cannot wrestle in here because you'll destroy things.
We're not going to talk about how my favorite antique wingback chairs were destroyed through some foolishness.
Right.
Right. And that's okay. It's okay for people to have different rules about these things. That's all right.
Yeah.
That's normal. And, I think that we need to keep that in mind, to remember that. But how do you handle it when your kids are struggling with it?
Well, okay. Let's start with the younger ones. The younger ones look at their older brothers and sisters, and they get to stay up late. They get to watch some things on TV that the little ones aren't allowed to, or they get to make some choices and have some freedoms that the younger ones don't. And younger ones, particularly when they get into middle schoolers are a challenging group, and a lot of times, that we parents have a hard time recognizing they're not little kids anymore, but they have a hard time understanding, and you're not grown up yet either. And so we've got to kind of walk a fine line between those two extremes there with them. But to make it clear to them, excuse me. And what we've said with our younger ones is to say, you know what, your older brother, yeah, he's got some freedoms, but you know what? He's got responsibilities that you don't have. That we expect him to do more around the house, or we expect him to take on more of the grown up work or grown up accountability.
Responsibility,
Yeah,
yeah.
responsibility for himself and all the rest of that. That you aren't. We don't expect you to do that yet. You're going to learn it. Your time will come.
Also, though, I think it's helpful to say, you realize he wasn't allowed to do those things when he was your age either.
Right.
And one day you're going to be his age and you're going to be able to do those things.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a matter of growing up. That as you grow up, you gain more maturity, hopefully. You gain more ability.
Right.
You're able to do things that you weren't able to do when you were younger. And sometimes you can turn to the older kid. Were you allowed to do that when you were this age?
Mm-hmm.
No, I wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it's hard for kids, particularly kids middle school and younger, to see things from somebody else's perspective.
Mm-hmm.
That in fact, being able to see things from somebody else's perspective is a sign of maturity.
Yeah, and some adults seem to struggle with this.
True,
Yeah.
true.
But yes,
Yeah.
that's part of that. When I was a child, I thought as a child, I spoke as a child, I reasoned as a child, and then I became a man and I put away childish things.
From 1 Corinthians 13.
From 1 Corinthians 13, the Apostle Paul is saying, children have a certain mental makeup. They have a certain reasoning ability, a certain type of logic of their own, which is not adult. It's not grown up.
Right.
It doesn't have experience. It doesn't have accountability. It's still kind of in a larval phase. That's not what Paul says, but that's isn't it? What was that? One of your professors that talked about college students being like larval adults. Yeah, some of them are.
Oh, hopefully,
some of them are.
I don't want our kids to be.
I know. I don't want them to be larvae. But
a challenge though to the parents.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes though, our kids will challenge us a little bit on these things, and really, we do need to change. I think it's really hard when they're moving into those preteen years, the tween preteen year, that they're growing, they're developing, and we see all the ways that they are failing and that they're struggling. But sometimes they do need to be given more responsibility, be given an opportunity to step up and do more.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I think we need to be careful to remember that we're not infallible, and we make mistakes.
No, and we don't get the perfect rule that never changes or adapts. And that's something, conversations that we have with some of our older kids, who said, well, you never let us do that, whatever it was. I don't, specifics, but you never let, and to say, what, we can be honest with them and say, you know what, you were our first, or you were in our first 2 or 3 kids, and we were still finding our way as parents. Now we see, okay, we have a culture that's established in our home. And so we didn't have to put as many rules in place because this is just the way that our family, kind of keeps itself going now. But also we recognize some of the things that we were really concerned about turned out not to be as important as we were trying to make them.
I can't tell you how many times I've said to our older kids, you're right. And I was wrong.
Uh-huh.
I should have handled things differently, but I didn't know any better.
Yeah.
And I know better now, and I'm doing differently. And I'm so sorry. Will you forgive me?
Yeah. Sometimes that's it. So, yep, you're right. Sorry.
Yep, you're right.
Can't fix that now. I can fix it for them, but I can't fix it for you. So.
Right. And I'm sorry. Will you forgive me?
Okay.
Sometimes though, we've had older kids say that, and I've said, you never asked. And they've said, well, I never dreamed you'd let me.
Oh, okay. That's
we had a miscommunication here.
That's a communication problem.
I didn't know you wanted to do that.
Uh-huh.
And
yeah.
I think that especially as our kids get older,
right,
that just being honest with them goes a long way. Just being willing to talk about it and say, you know what, I was wrong, or I didn't know, or you didn't ask, or let's talk about it. And sometimes to say, I decided this is what I thought was best, but you may decide differently when you get to be a parent, and that's okay. Because there's a wide range of Christian liberty. God's law doesn't change, but our rules change.
And as our circumstances change, then sometimes the rules will change as well. That you just think about if you, all right, well, just a hypothetical. Let's say that if you lived out on a large piece of property out in the country and your kids could just go out and play without supervision, they could run through the neighborhood and explore the woods and all. And then you had a job change and you found yourself living in a subdivision where that just wasn't possible, that they needed more supervision,
Yeah.
there had to be more rules. No, you can't just run anywhere. You're not allowed to cross the street in this neighborhood. That's kind of rule that you put in place there. And that's not a matter of maturity or anything. It's a matter of the circumstances
Yeah.
changed, and so our rules needed to change to accommodate those things.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it helps a lot if we are vulnerable with our kids as they're reaching adulthood,
Mm-hmm.
so they know that we don't think that we're perfect.
Mm-hmm.
Because when we let them know, I'm
Mm-hmm.
doing the best I can,
Mm-hmm.
I think that cuts off some of that frustration and, how could you do this to me, when they understand that, we are also sinners struggling to do what we think is best in this world.
Well, that's part of having the relationship where they feel that they can, have discussions with you and raise questions. And yeah, sometimes they'll see something, an inconsistency, or maybe they'll see a side that we didn't notice and say, "Wow, um, now that you brought that up, yeah, I could see your point."
Yeah.
And that's fair. That's okay. It's also okay to say, no, there's a reason we do that. Let me just explain this to you, and
Yeah.
I hope that you can uh, come along with us on this. But this is the way it's going to have to be. One of the things that we had to make a distinction between the ages of our kids, and our kids are spread out pretty evenly. So it wasn't like, some families we've known who have like two or three kids who are college age and two or three kids who are like elementary school. And there's this like almost like two different cultures there. Ours are all kind of spread out along the spectrum, but there was a point where we had to say with our older ones, okay, we've talked about how to make decisions about entertainment, say, um, and you are of an age to make some decisions, and we're not gonna we're not gonna say no. However, we are still trying to form that discernment in your younger brothers and sisters, and so we would prefer, if you want to listen to that style of music or whatever, that you keep that at college and not bring it home to your younger siblings who are not really ready to handle this.
Who just don't have the discernment to say, this is pretty good. There are these issues with it.
Right.
That's
Right.
okay.
Yeah.
Because again, there's a huge wide range of Christian liberty,
Mm-hmm.
but some things are profitable for some people and are not profitable for other people because of their susceptibilities or the maturity of their age. For example,
Mm-hmm.
there are movies that we have loved and enjoyed with our teens that are
Mm-hmm.
not appropriate for 5-year-olds,
Right.
and that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really important you help your kids understand that that's okay, that
Mm-hmm.
that there are things that will come with maturity.
I tend to use the term. It's a little. I mean, it sounds kind of, take it as you will, but I tend to use the term grown up because adult tends to have the overtones of, oh, we're talking about something which is, pornographic or whatever. So we don't mean that, but say there are, I think it was Rush Limbaugh used to talk about grown up beverages.
Yeah.
Like you don't give a beer to your 5-year-old. Well, we don't drink beer either, but that was kind of his example, that there are things which are appropriate for adults, for grown up people, and not for the children. It doesn't mean it's evil for the grown-ups, but it does mean that it's not advisable for the kids. And so making that kind of distinction even within your own family, I think is appropriate. And it is something that we need to do because it's the right thing.
Well, that's one of the things that's helpful about having a coming of age ceremony, as your kids move into those teen
Mm-hmm.
years, to help them to help those younger ones to see,
Mm-hmm.
this is somebody moving into a new stage of life, and things are going to be handled differently for them.
And when we have done this kind of thing with our young people, it's always been the sense of, okay, we are now going to consider you a young adult. We're not going to consider you one of the little kids. And that also means that we're going to expect more of you. that
Yeah.
we're going to expect you to start to carry yourself with a little more wisdom, to have a little more self-control in the way that you speak and the way that you decide things, or choices you make. And so yeah, that was a good transition. And
Yeah.
we've got
And
to
not that it's something you have to do.
no, but it was a good expedient thing for
Yeah.
us, I think. And we need to put some links in the show notes because
Okay.
we have some resources about that.
Yes. So,
Mhm.
Hal, we need to wrap it up.
Well,
We want to encourage you to check out Craftsman Crate as we move into summer. Oh, we got a freebie if you hang on to the end, okay?
oh, good.
Craftsman Crate is our subscription box. It teaches artisanal crafts
Mhm.
using real tools and totally complete kits. No trips to the store, Mom.
Mhm.
It has everything. If they need a pencil, it's in there and it's sharp.
Mhm.
And they can learn all kinds of cool things like soapstone carving, wood burning, water marbling, all kinds of cool stuff.
Mhm.
Check it out at craftsmancrate.com.
Yeah.
And also, we have a freebie for you.
And what is that freebie?
It is at raisingrealmen.com/summerfun. It's a printable with 101 cool things to do this summer. And
Oh,
I
wow.
recommend you print it out and stick it on your refrigerator. And every time your kids say they're bored, say, go pick something out and do it. A lot of cool things that Hal and I did growing up and that your kids will enjoy too.
Okay. And so that's raisingrealmen.com/summerfun, all one word?
All one word, summer fun.
Okay.
Okay.
Right. So that's good. Yeah. Well, recognize that you've got opportunities. You've got opportunities this summer and really all year round, but in particular in the summer when the schedules change and there's vacation time and maybe time off for the breadwinner in the family and the rest of that, it's good to have these discussions. So look, we appreciate you joining us. We are trying to take biblical principles into the 21st century family, and hope that you will join us again as we look at making biblical family life a practical reality in your home. Okay, I'm Hal.
And I'm Melanie.
Thanks for joining us.
Bye, y'all.
Bye-bye.